It's a CTV time in association with the Sunyata Institute and the Society for the Center for Alternative Realities. We've come to present another mind-bending show tonight. This is going to be, I have to tell you, doing the research on this show, I freaked out. I literally did it. You know, I thought I was open-minded. I thought I had the ability to understand things. But I found out I'm just a babe in the woods when it comes to some of this stuff that's out there. If you want to really know about it, get your head out of the sand. Can we have that first number one roll in? Take your head out of the sand, people. First thing we're going to do is look at this book, if we could, the book. Human Race, Get Off Your Knees by David Icke. The Lion Sleeps No More. If we could show that picture of that book, hopefully.
That's
okay, well, first, here it is. The guy with the head in the sand. See, in order to get your head in the sand, you have to get down on your knees like that. And this is what Ike is saying is happening with most people. It only works for a short time, folks. You can only stick your head in the sand so long. We've got, and I don't know if we could show that book after that. We've got stuff
that Human
tonight.
Race Sleeps No More.
Yeah,
cover.
We could show that book of David Icke because we're going to devote the entire hour. I started thinking when I was going to put the show together about all the different roll-ins I could have brought in. I could have brought in the Matrix. I could have brought in H.G. Wells' Shape of Things to Come. Just endless number of different storylines that have been presented in Hollywood that deal with exactly what this guy's talking about. Human race, get off of your knees. He's saying that we're being bombarded daily by a conspiracy of enormous proportions. And we'll get into a little bit of it, but the first thing I'd like to say is that if we could come back to me, the ancient alien evidence is being examined. See this? Mainstream magazine, they're actually starting to examine ancient alien evidence. If you can believe it, these guys.
So what's the magazine?
What's the magazine, Stephen? The Skeptic, which is no friend.
The Skeptic is being somewhat non-skeptical that it's a reality?
They're at least looking at it. They're at least imagining it. This book that we just put up there, the David Icke book, this guy has been ridiculed and basically called a nutter and called a crazy man by virtually all of his contemporaries. And it reminds me of that guy that discovered the continental drift. Remember that German back in the 1880s? And he says, it looks like the continents are drifting apart. And every single mainstream expert denied it and laughed at him and said, you're crazy, you know, these continents don't move. And now what do we think today? Virtually everybody's convinced that the continents are drifting, the plates are sliding up and down on each other.
It's the main geologic force over time on the surface of the planet.
And when did
generating volcanoes, earthquakes, everything.
When's the last time any of us went out and checked half of this stuff that these so-called experts are telling us is the way it is? You know, we may find out that there's something even more bizarre than tectonic plate shifting. Maybe it could be that the center of the Earth is actually a nuclear reactor. I've seen it on the cover of Popular Science.
Well,
because there's radioactive anomalies that cannot be explained through our current model of the core of the Earth being just a ball of iron. It could be that there's actually a miniature sun inside of our Earth and that the outside crust is like built around the outside of the sun that's using nuclear fusion to create the heat that we call lava and such. But see, right now, you tell anybody about that, they go, oh, there's no evidence. There's no Higgs bosons out there.
People know the core is molten. Extremely hot.
But let's get going with this book, because there is something here. And how much of it is real and how much of it is myth, I'll leave it up to the audience to decide. But he starts out this book by saying that we've lost a lot of human capability. that that in the ancient times, our minds were basically much more able than they are now. That we had, which we're just discovering now, we had telepathic capabilities. We could live to be incredibly old. That there was no male-female split. That the axis of the Earth was parallel to the sun, and when it rotated, we had an eternal spring on Earth. This is David Icke's idea. That quite a while ago, a couple million years ago, just like Velikovsky says, that we were captured by a alien race. Hang on to your seats, folks. The moon is a portal for these aliens, and if we could show that one photograph of the moon, let's see, that's I think it's number 11. If we could show number 11 up there, the reason he says this, or one of the reasons, is that when we sent our spacecraft up there, they dropped the lander off on the moon, and when it hit the moon, these astronauts, before they were censored, said that the moon made a sound like a bell. It resonated, and we have, like we did a show not too long ago on remember the, what was it, transient lunar phenomenon, that we've had hundreds and hundreds of reports of these lights on the moon?
Lights, they may be perhaps from objects that are actually sending off reflective glints of light, or they may be shading the surface through various colored glasses and things. There may be glass structures. In fact, it seems that there are very large glass structures on the moon. It's been pointed out by some people that if you form glass in a vacuum and the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, then you produce something that's stronger than steel would be here on Earth. But there it is on the moon.
Well, in this picture here, he's saying that these craters are far too shallow than what they should be. They're much wider than they should be, and they're much shallower than they should be, unless there's some sort of artificial object there on the moon.
There is a statement that was made by Jim Marrs in his bestseller, The Alien Agenda, that it was widely spoken of, it was known that the Apollo crew that went and drilled into the moon to get core, some kind of subsurface samples, we're having a great deal of difficulty penetrating the moon because there's a certain shallow layer of dust, and then you seem to run into what seems to be metal.
Yeah.
The thing's sort of a metal object.
And holes that have no bottom to them, which is another bizarre thing. If we could show that next, number 12, John, Phobos, and then the next page with the Death Star, he's saying that our movies and things are revealing a collective unconscious of humanity that is structuring a certain reality around the possibility that there could be these artificial satellites as big as the moon that have been made by advanced civilizations. And that Phobos, if we can get number 12 up there, is one such candidate for an artificial object that's been created that's around Mars right now. It's a small moon.
Small moon of Mars.
That is too low
of a small planet
to be explained according to the current theories that we have about why is Phobos so low, and it's too light. See, there's a picture of Phobos right there. It's got a big, it's like a potato, looks like a big potato.
Sort of barely spherical.
Barely spherical. Now I don't know if you remember years ago, one of our first shows, we did a show about the Russian probe Phobos. Remember they sent Russian probe Phobos? And the last shot of the probe was a big, huge silver disc.
Or a kind of, it's hard to say if it was silver disc. It looked to me like more like a glowing blob thing that was coming at the ship.
Glowing blob thing, and then all of a sudden the Russian satellite's gone.
I think they have, moving pictures of it that last about a second and a half. The Russians, and it's been shown before.
according to Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Movement, check it out on your internet, folks, they've found spaceships that are 27 and a half miles long.
Maybe it was Life magazine in the late 50s or early 60s was making, they had stories that ran as kind of almost feature articles really, in their science section that were talking about an extra moon, that it was revealed that the Earth had an extra moon, some object, that was showing up on, it was being tracked, and it was apparently there, and it was, they were wondering whether it was artificial or not at the time. But see, in the late 50s still, you weren't quite out of the period of time when people in general, or the media was, more open-minded about alien or whatever they were, crafts and ships operated by the others, whoever they are. It wasn't so debunked, as to be ridiculous at the time.
Part of the reason we bring all this up is because one of the theories is that the moon is a portal for these extraterrestrial, or he calls them interdimensional, advanced reptilian species that, I don't want to get into it this early, but seeing as how we've already opened up the book, let's take a look at number 3 just for a little comic relief for the moment. But he's saying that when they brought this moon in, it took the planet and twisted it so that we now have a planet that's on an axis.
Our planet?
And the Earth. And it created the seasons. And that this race of intelligent lizard-like creatures started genetically altering humans and creating male and females out of us, and basically deadening down the human through these genetic manipulations until they created a hybrid, alien-human hybrid that today is our military-industrial. Now, here's one of the reasons I say some of these things are being what they call shaded into normal consciousness, because this little guy, he's the alien, and he's kind of a foster kid in the family, if you ever see the ad. But they're trying to make it sound like these guys are nice and cute and lovable little, creatures. And for all we know, maybe a lot of them are, but there are other ones that are not lovable and cute, and that they've been setting up this hybrid bloodline since way back that is still created today in our society. And to give evidence to that, he goes back to let's take a picture of this. Here's some evidence. Number 6 there, the Pope. Today we have the Pope in our society as the leader of the Christians. And the Pope is a continuation of a god that they called Onus back in Sumerian society. And in fact, today, they still wear the same exact headdress. If you ever take a look at the Pope's headdress, it looks just like the fish god that was the original Onus. He was also known as Nimrod. Early on in these Sumerian societies, while they were writing these plates, they still had contact with these creatures.
Is that Onus with his magic rod of Nimrod and his basket of
These
goodies?
are early gods. These are what they create. These guys became fish gods because they were hybrids of these reptilians. And the Pope today is still a fish god in a sense, because he's part of the bloodline.
The mitre does seem to be the open mouth of a fish. It does. It does seem that way.
Yeah. Says they're...
but they explain it, I think, probably as being that they take it from Peter having been a fisherman or something.
He says Babylon, which was, if we could go to, let's see, The one, well, I guess we didn't put it down here, but he says that originally the Babylon was in Sumeria, which is now Iraq, and that the new Babylon is called Babylondon. That the majority of these influences that are coming through this, what he calls the moon matrix, are centered in London. That's the new Babylon, Babylondon, see, is what he calls it, which is kind of humorous, I thought. But in order to give some credence to this, let's take a look at number 4, a picture of Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. Because these two men were members of what's called the Fabian Society, the English London School of Economics. And virtually everybody who's been in power has gone through this London School of Economics.
The Fabians were famous for their gradualistic and supposedly moderate approach to implementing a Marxism economically in society.
Well, these guys right here, there's Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. They
friendlier
wrote 2
socialism.
books. You know the 2 books, right? 1984 and Brave New World, that were based on the ideas of the Fabian Society. The Fabian Society also influenced the eugenics movement, which we now call Planned Parenthood, which is, they switched the name, but the eugenics movement means good birth. And there was a huge move back in the turn of the century, the 19th to the 20th century, to eliminate people that were inferior, which is kind of the Nazi idea of getting rid of. Yeah, getting rid of all the gypsies, get rid of all the mentally deficient people, get rid of all. And this is all coming through this Fabian secret society bloodline that goes all the way back to Babylon. That the Church of Rome is actually the Church of Babylon, but it's been, it's pretty in depth. It's an amazing book if you get into it. And Aldous Huxley and George Orwell wrote these 2 classic books that are based on the genetic manipulation of society in the future, so that these directors of the programs can have exactly the sort of people that they want to live on the earth. They need more garbage collectors. They go to their test tube bank, put a little poison in.
But these were both written of by these people as dystopias rather than utopias.
And he's saying the dystopia that they wrote about is exactly what the reptiles want, and that's what we've got today.
So are you saying, though, that the Fabians are in with the reptiles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, then why do Aldous Huxley and Orwell, you write the books that they do that decry the dangers of these particular eugenic societies?
We've looked into this, and you can believe it or not, but according to David Icke, and I was saving this for later, the good news, supposedly, is that what we live in, and he gives quite a bit of evidence for this, is a holographic projection. The 3-dimensional world that we think we live in is a holographic projection that's coming from the surface of the black holes in our universe. And the black holes are creating the suns, and there's these vibratory, what he calls resonances, the vibrational waves that go to the sun first, and they are transmitted to the earth through photons. And the reason why the reptiles have the moon is to intercept these, what he calls truth vibrations, which is the only way that we're ever going to break the grip of the reptiles, according to David Icke, is to tune into the truth vibrations that the universe is actually already providing for us. And the reason he says this is because he shows, and now we got a brain here, he shows how the twin hemispheres of the brain, if we could get a close-up on that, number 2 camera, the twin hemispheres of the brain are created differently and have been programmed differently. We got a little model here of the brain and the twin hemispheres, but if you look at it sideways here, you can see that it's made up of basically 3 parts. I'll just hold one up. This little tiny white part down here is what they call the reptilian stem. And that's how most of the people in the world are being affected by the moon matrix, he calls it. This little black blob here is what's called the limbic system, or the mammalian brain. And then this big frothy part on the top is the neocortex. And what he's saying is that the reptilian brain is clogging up these truth vibrations from getting to the neocortex. And that's how they keep people in a state of fear and in a state of dependency, and the idea that they're just little reptile people here on the earth. We're just little humans. We have no real connection to anything bigger than ourselves. And they get people thinking along the lines like the guy that wrote this Ancient Alien, the skeptics of the world, that if they can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, measure it in some way, it does not exist to them. But it keeps popping through. And the reason I brought this little thing here, if we can get a picture of this is part of the unconscious nature of the human mind to create images. This is something I picked up in Laos when I was there, that transmit mythological realities through pictures. And if you look right at the center of this, you can see that there's an I Ching symbol. And then surrounding it, on the outside here, is a circle of dragons, which is another symbol for the reptiles. And then on the outside of this trio of images, which we can't see for crap, but anyway, it's...
That's okay. It's all right.
It's not in focus, is a universe that we don't see. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing when we get all these guys like Richard Dawkins and all these so-called experts to tell us that there's no evidence that any of this stuff has any reality at all, we're contradicted by the amount of psychological evidence that we have throughout history, through the studies that have been done, of abilities that certain individuals seem to possess that tune into a different version of reality than what we've been sold. We've been sold this idea, and he goes to show how the brain, the twin hemispheres of the brain, that 90% of the people in our society are right-handed. The right-hand side of the brain transfers to the left part of the brain, which is very linear or sequential. So if you were looking at it like it was a computer, this side of the brain is from past to present to future. It thinks of things as a continuation, like a river flowing. The right side of the brain, which is the left-handed people, which is only 10% of the population, have a parallel computer. The side of the brain that's the left side, or the right side, is parallel computer, which means that every one of the things is held in a sort of a quantum state simultaneously. And our ancient humans, like the Aboriginals from Australia, realized that the universe, and if you look in certain Buddhist things, that time doesn't really exist like we think it does. Or on the other hand, time exists exactly as we think it does, but in reality, the universe is actually a still point, like a huge, amazing crystal or fractal of some sort that generates through the black holes the human. And I'm not making this stuff up. This is, even our scientists are saying that this is a possibility, because they say on the event horizon of a black hole, you get a state of eternal reoccurrence, or looping, a time loop. If we could have a picture of that time loop.
A crystal, Blue, if you were to shatter a crystal, a lot of the time, if depending on the purity and strength of the crystalline form, you shatter it, it breaks up into miniature versions of the same thing, or it breaks along certain crystal lines that keep replicating the same pattern.
And same with a hologram.
Well,
it's the same thing.
What you're describing could also be described as, the general theme of the ancient religion of Gnosticism, and you find versions of Gnosticism in modern religion now, and in that there's a kind of eternal truth or godness that is always trying to break through a kind of false godness or a false reality that thinks it's the reality and holds on to that really tightly.
Right.
And in
Through
so many
fear,
ways
usually.
throughout all of human experience,
Yeah, there's the time loops. If you
you
look
see
on
this thing repeated over and over again.
You see, most people are hypnotized through their defective holographic computers because the moon matrix is interfering with our reception of these truth vibrations from the sun and from the black holes, and creating false realities where we start using the left side of our brain and start seeing things in sequence. Well, we remember ourselves through these time loops, which is the same thing the scientists are saying about falling into the black hole.
In Gnosticism, there's a kind of false ego sort of created God that is most responsible for creating the kind of reality that we have around us. And yet, it is so concerned with preventing the truth of the greater reality from penetrating, down to the lowest levels of understanding that, it causes all sorts of distortions of actual reality at all levels within, the structure it's responsible for.
I was pleased to see that on Nova they actually talked about Einstein, and his greatest contribution to the theory of relativity was the idea of non-movement, and that movement creates distortions in the space-time continuum. We're like in a jello universe, and if there's any movement at all, we're like pushing against the jello, creating all kinds of cracks and little rifts and distortions. And that these aliens, these reptiles, you can call them the Rothschilds, you can call them the reptiles, you can call them the Republicans, you can call them anything you want, but they're basically a lineage of very intelligent creatures of some sort that are using humans as a food source. And that if you look at all of our religions, they're based on some kind of ingestion of blood. Just like vampires, just like, creature. Look at the Aztecs. Look at all the blood they spilled as an appeasement to these gods. It's all about the blood, spill the blood. You go to these religious groups, blood of Jesus, it's all the blood. The blood is a DNA decoding crystalline-like structure that creates the reality that we see through a resonance field that we create in our brain holographically. That's been pretty well proven through brain studies that what we're looking at is not what's out there. What we're looking at and what we see is our interpretation of what we're looking at. And that if you go through different cultures and different time periods, the exact same phenomenon can be seen in multiple different ways. And right now, we're being interfered with from seeing it clearly. I challenge people, take a look at this thing. Just see if you can't see yourself in there somehow creating a reality around yourself. But in the ancient sense of it, you don't actually move, see? You are kind of like in the test tube in the Matrix. The mental food is being fed into you through this looping mechanism that keeps creating a consistent reality. So when people take things like psilocybin and LSD and other things, they interfere with that consistency and allow a broader spectrum of wavelengths to come in. And I don't know how many people have studied this, and this is what this David Icke's saying all the time, is that most of the people that poo-poo this have never studied it. They don't want to know. They got no interest in reptiles, and it's way too scary for them. So the people who do get involved with it are these satanic sort of psychopathic people who happen to be people that run corporations and heads of state and military industrial heads. You don't want to. Don't listen to me. Listen to Bill Moyers last weekend. Did you happen to hear?
No.
He did an interview with a guy that wrote Anatomy of the Deep State, that talked about what is the deep state, what is the real power behind the throne in America. And he finds out it's
the
this
point of
network,
high technology and alien contact.
Bankers, the high technology people, military industrial complex, all of these guys working together in what you call the breakaway society are creating And it's done because they're hypnotized to an extent by this hybrid bloodline from the big money people. I know it's bizarre because nobody ever tells us this stuff. Everybody tells us, you're crazy.
I'm not saying that it might not be true, but he seems so certain about his particular kind of alien, and I think it's sort of, it's more. I think it's more important that there is some level of contact and interest, on the part of aliens, and that there's one particular, reptilian race, and I don't really see what his particular evidences are for focusing on that. In many ways,
take a look.
I think that he's having a kind of religious vision in some ways,
No, he's saying, let's take a look. Let's see what the evidence is. Let's take a look at Alfa Romero. If we can put that Alfa Romero symbol up there. The Alfa Romero is a Italian car manufacturer that is part of this reptilian bloodline. He calls it hybrid bloodline people. And if you look at the Alfa Romero
symbol,
the Alfa Romero
see
symbol,
that perhaps?
You'll see a snake eating a man. If you ever go down to Chichen Itza in Mexico,
there it is.
Yeah.
There's
Take a look at the little snake and see the little red man being eaten by the snake?
Yeah, it could be.
See, this is all based on the ancient idea of the snake as a god, and the god is devouring man in order to maintain its sustenance. See, the blood of man, the bone. These reptiles actually eat human beings.
Of course, the Alfa Romero people are saying that's a guy on the road going down his turns.
All right, let's look at something else then, if you don't believe that one. Let's take a look at number 8 there, the 40-foot tall Bohemian Grove owl. This is something the average person will never see the inside of, but we, through our extensive connections here at the CTV Society, were able to get a picture of this 40-foot
the giant Hera
owl, which is an ancient symbol from Egypt
for
death
and Greece. It's
and wisdom.
It's the great goddess, wife of Zeus, for the Greeks.
That's number
also
number 8, John.
Mother of the gods.
There it is. See, we'll never get in there. You have to be a billionaire just to get into the Bohemian Grove. That's what they do. They do these fire worships around this 40-foot owl, and they drink blood.
Well, I think at the solstice they officially banish death, and death talks back and says, "Ha ha! You cannot banish me! Ha ha!" And then somehow they trick death into being banished for one more year.
They got a TV show on now called The Following. Have you ever seen that? But the last episode, I just happened to catch it. They tie this woman to a stake and drain her blood out and drink it. It's on TV right now. It's called The Following. It's about these crazy cult followers. See, they're always trying to make it somewhat acceptable. Oh yeah, they're just crazy cult followers drinking human blood. But you find out that as you penetrate these layers and layers of these secret societies that are actually the deep state, not just in America, but all over the world, that there are these sort of skull and bone societies, Freemasonry societies.
If you have ceremonies and things that you do, that if the outside world were to know of them, they would ostracize you, then that's sort of a way of separating yourself from the rest of society, and then you're already in an environment where you can dare to plan to ruthlessly control the rest of society, I suppose.
Well, here's another example. Number 7 there, John, if you can put it up. The Kaaba in Mecca. Do you know what's in the Kaaba?
A rock.
A giant
asteroid.
piece of the moon.
Oh, a moon that fell.
A moon meteorite, yeah.
It's a big rock, yeah.
It's a huge rock.
It's an iron meteorite.
You know what happened? Okay, Rick's on the phone? Yeah, let's take just a second, Rick. We'll be right with you. But this Kaaba, that is the holiest point for the Muslims, contains a piece of a meteorite. Mm-hmm. Before Muhammad came, this holy site was a meeting grounds of all the pagan religions. And it had, inside of this cube was every sort of tribal god that they could come up with.
It was a pantheon for the tribal gods of Arabia.
Muhammad came and he kicked them all out, but he left the moon meteorite. Why do you think that might be?
It expresses a kind of faceless unity.
And the moon is the thing we're talking about as being the home of these, he calls them interdimensional creatures. They're not even actually, they can only get into our reality by hybrid bloodlines, and then they resonate. They're in a different dimension. So these UFOs and things that we see that disappear is because they increase their vibrational frequency and go outside of our, I mean, we just have this narrow little wavelength of visible light and 5 senses. He's saying we've lost so many things through this genetic manipulation that we end up with people like Richard Dawkins that can't see the forest because they're so busy counting all the trees, you know. That all there is trees. There's no forest there. There's only trees, you know. They are so busy with the minute details. And it goes on and on. Many, this little box here.
To admit that we don't understand and know is
that's the Jewish version of the meteorite right there. They put it on their forehead.
Right.
And they pray with this little box on their foreheads.
We have a call.
Oh, sorry. Rick, you're on the phone. Hello, Rick.
Rick.
Fascinating topic, but I got to say, Blue.
Hey, could we have you turned up, Rick, a bit?
Pardon me?
You need to be turned up a little for us to hear you.
Little volume.
You hear me?
We can hear you, but not much, not very well.
Talk louder?
That's good.
No, that's good. Right there.
Yeah, okay, Rick.
Well, I was just going to say, Blue, you're traveling into areas here where the Birchers, Lyndon LaRouche, Jim Mars, Tex Mars, none of these folks have gone. Now, I know who David Icke is.
Oh, you're going away again for us.
I know who David Icke is.
Yeah.
And he's a little strange, I think. And there used to be a guy that came to the media center named Warren that's into this stuff. I don't know if you know who that is.
I do not. No.
Okay.
No, I do appreciate that there's something about Icke that I find kind of a little strange too. I appreciate a lot of his research and stuff, but I feel like he's more a person who's had a religious mission, and he's also latched on to some actual conspiratorial patterns.
And I've heard it said that he was somewhat anti-Semitic, but of course the same charges have been leveled against LaRouche and to a certain extent the Birchers, you know. And of course, I think just because someone has a grain of truth, you know, it doesn't mean that everything they're saying is true. In fact, half-truths are more dangerous than outright lies, because if you tell an outright lie, it can be pretty well debunked. But if you tell a half-truth, people might latch on to the part that's half-true. Now, there certainly are evil groups. And when you mentioned, Blue, earlier about, you know, what do you call it, the Rothschilds or the Republicans, they're very intelligent.
Yeah.
Believe me, there aren't too many intelligent Republicans left anymore since William Buckley passed away.
Right.
I think they're a bunch of redneck jerks, you know, or at least the people they're pandering to. But I do believe there is an elite group that rules the world, and I believe it probably is the bankers. And when people say international bankers, you get accused of anti-Semitism too, but I believe these bankers come from all groups. In fact, this Trilateral Commission that we hear about in certain right-wing groups is called Trilateral because they're based in Japan, which is in Asia, Europe, and North America. So it has nothing to do with ethnicity or, you know, what color skin they are or what religion. It's all about money. And I think, although it may seem mundane to say that humans that wear suits and manipulate money are the ones ruling the world, I don't think we have to look for lizards or reptiles or Illuminati or any of this other stuff. I think we just have to look at unscrupulous human beings who are willing to expend human lives and human treasure, you know, to start wars, start depressions. I think that's what it's really all about, and I think that's what people are afraid of. I don't think anybody's afraid to talk about lizards and all that. I think that's just a distraction. We've got to look at Homo sapiens that have a lot of money and a lot of power. And these people are extremely cruel, some of them, and you know, they may not have been as overtly brutal as Stalin and Hitler, but nevertheless they're trying to use more, you know, you might say the velvet hammer to take over the world. What say you?
Well, I would say that if you take a look on the internet on the thrivemovement.com, you'll see a 2-hour movie that gives a little bit of an explanation of this in greater depth than we're going to be able to go into tonight. But the basic premise is that there are advanced societies on Earth, whether they are extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or just terrestrial human beings, that are very far advanced over the average human being on Earth. And that they've found that it's to their benefit to create wars and create all kinds of strife, because if it ain't broke, you can't make any money off it. So they got to go out there and they got to break everything up, and that's what basically they're doing. They're using the war machines, and
they already had most of the money and power already.
Now you say that there's no evidence of these reptilians or other
Well, I didn't say
type
there's no
creatures.
evidence. I just simply say I don't think we have to look to something so exotic and weird as that. I mean, reptiles that were able to tip the planet, off of its axis and all that, and the really weird thing that you were talking about, they created the sexes. Well, if there were no two sexes before that happened, how in the world did humans reproduce?
The whole thing about creating the sexes, I think that's another place where this vision that Ike is having kind of goes into the religious realm, because I think he's philosophizing about a kind of lost golden age, in a way before time, that's sort of occurring to him as a vision, as it's, occurred to, all sorts of theosophists and,
Right.
Atlantis-type people.
Well, you don't have to go that far from your religion there, Rick, to go back into the book of Genesis and find out that before Eve was created, there was just one race of humans on the earth, according to the book.
You mean just one sex?
Just one sex, well, one gender. And that the
One
snake
gender, right.
is often visualized, if you take all the skin off the snake, as a ladder with a lot of different ribs. And the ribs, remember Eve was made from the rib of Adam?
Right.
Well, supposedly the reptilians are this advanced species, and I can see how the reptilians could have come into being, because we know in our science that there were these giant reptiles 165 million years ago.
Yeah, but they weren't too bright.
But they had 165 million years to get bright. See, we've only had a couple million years as human beings to get bright.
I know, Blue, but the thing is, if you're looking at the meat eaters, the Tyrannosaurus and so forth.
Yeah, and the velociraptors, they were very intelligent.
They were very vicious.
They're really a kind of bird creature.
They were very
warm-blooded
vicious, and they probably killed everything else. And I don't even think humans existed at that time, and I can't prove it. But they didn't use any kind of subtle means to take over the world, because the world probably wasn't really worth taking over them, because, and even if it were, they didn't have the ability. They had very small brains. The Stegosaurus, they said, had a brain the size of a chicken egg, maybe. So they were very.
How big was our ancestors' brain? Supposedly we were some kind of shrew-like creature. We had this little tiny brain.
But I think
it's all mythology, isn't it? Even our
I don't
science
know
is
if it's
myth.
mythology or not. But I do think what we've got here, and I heard you speaking earlier about, was it Stephen
Greer?
or Richard Dawkins, rather, the atheist?
Oh,
right?
Richard Dawkins, yeah.
And I know both of you are not conventional Christians or even theists, but you do believe in some type of spirituality, and I think you would agree with me that atheism is not really a viable worldview. I mean, people can have it, but I think the problem is sometimes we look at the extremes, and we say, well, those atheists can't be right. But I think the New Ageists, which is what I would label them, and maybe you two guys, and I don't use that in a pejorative way, but I just think that it's kind of a opposite extreme to the atheism, and maybe the truth is somewhere in between,
Well, this is the quantum leap. You know about where the word quantum leap came from?
Well, it comes from physics, but...
Yeah, it came from the electron when it would jump orbit and would create a new orbit. But there was no movement from one orbit to the next that would just immediately appear in the next orbit. So they call that the quantum leap.
So what do you analogize that to?
And where did it go? He's saying that there's a whole lot of information.
Well, who's he now?
David Icke.
Okay.
That is not being registered by our five senses in our visual field of light. That we're being immersed in a field
Well, I guess my
creates a
question
holographic
then
reality.
is, if these lizards, or whatever you want to call them, are so powerful, why do they have to use all these roundabout...
Because there's only a few of them, and there's billions of us. We're the sheep. They're feeding
well,
off of the
it doesn't matter.
human
I mean,
beings.
it doesn't matter. They could step on us like ants, so to speak, couldn't they?
Well, why? We're their food source.
Pardon me?
We're their food source.
They're eating us?
They're eating us. What do you think all this blood is about?
Well,
They're drinking our blood,
you know what? That is a good question,
Yeah, but
because it's interesting that if you take the Bible literally, the Father Jehovah had to have even his own son shed blood. And if you look at the beginning there with Cain and Abel, Jehovah became angry at Cain because he did not have a blood sacrifice, and it makes one think.
These are all symbols.
I just wanted to finish the thought. The people that subscribe to this lizard theory say what's behind all this is the fact that lizards very much like to eat meat, and they like blood. And I do think of all the things you said tonight, that might be the most salient, because there is something to ponder there. Why all this talk about blood and bloodshed, you know?
It seems to me...
A lot of bloodshed.
It seems to me
Whether it's
more
war,
valuable as...
whether it's war or the shooting epidemics that seem to be happening, or you mentioned, you know, the religious rituals where the Catholics, for instance, even believe that every time they have a mass, Jesus' blood is being shed again. So why all this obsession with blood? It does make one ponder.
Well, he's saying that the blood is actually a crystalline decoding device, that these subtle abilities that we've lost are because our blood's been screwed with, and that we've ended up with just a shell of what humanity used to be.
Yeah.
And he goes back to these ancient myths like Atlantis and Lemuria, and you know, even in your own book, The Garden of Eden, when supposedly we had a lot better time.
I didn't write it.
If I could I say that I think that that Ike has lots of research, and there's the true stuff. You know, there are globalists, there are interlocking conspiracies.
Absolutely.
There's all sorts of interest by elite people in having us live in a false reality, you know, doing things that they want against our own interests.
Fox
And
News.
then he puts it into this whole context with these particular aliens, you know, and I think that there are aliens out there, but I think that his particular focus on a particular type of alien that I don't think he has all that much. He doesn't have anything really concrete as
Well, there is no
evidence
concrete.
to
It's
say
metaphysical.
that there are these particular type of aliens. By focusing on these particular type of aliens
interdimensional, Rick.
and saying that, you know, the elite people or all of us are their descendants or something
Yeah,
in some way
I
is
think you're
clouding
right on there,
things
Mark.
too
See,
much, and
I
it
think you
becomes
have a
too
good
much
point.
of a
I think,
distraction
Lou,
to
what you're saying there is
to-
kind of
to
what
some real
Christians say
things.
when people ask a relevant question, you know, to kind of get back to rationality, and these fundamentalist Christians will say, well, that's just a mystery, we can't understand it. And now what you're saying, and it's, again, I'm not being critical, but what you're saying is...
Lots of fundamentalist Christians
they're
really get
interdimensional,
into
so we
this,
can't
actually.
understand
Well, it's
them.
not just me saying it. Take a look at, if we can put up that number 14 when we get a chance. I think you can stay on the line, but take a look at this hologram. This is a New Scientist. You know, this is a New Scientist magazine, which is not a wild radical magazine.
No, I know
But
that.
they're basically saying that there's a lot of evidence now
Well,
that
okay,
psychologically our brains operate to
Oh,
the
okay.
same degree. Look at here's this magazine here. The New Scientist magazine, you are a hologram.
But that's got nothing to do with lizards trying to take over the world, though.
Yes, it does, because the programming of a hologram
Well,
is information.
see, in his book, in this particular book, which is about 700 pages long, Ike, one of the things he proposes is that we're essentially living in a false hologram that's being projected at us through, you know, the lizard mind matrix kind of thing.
Moon
And
Matrix,
so-
he calls it.
Did that book just come out, by the way?
No, 2010.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, that could be true, but I don't know where you go from that to saying that lizards are behind it.
I think lizards are kind of his way of tying all the things that he sees going on as effects and giving them a cause.
He says our ancient human relatives made the gods out of the images that they saw as powerful beings.
That's
They
possible.
made them out of alligators. They made them out of giant snakes. If you go down to South America and take the ayahuasca drug, you will eventually see these giant snakes roaming all through the jungle. They're just outside of our frequency range.
If you take a drone, you say?
Kabbalists
These
will
are
say,
real. In a metaphysical sense, they're real. And this is why Richard Dawkins can never go there. See, Richard Dawkins is what he calls a flatlander.
Well, I agree. Dawkins is too
I've
far
read
off
that.
on the skeptical side, but I think these New Agers are going too far the other way.
Well, I
They're
think
looking
that
for something
religion
really exotic.
makes it.
Why can't we just say that there are very evil, power-hungry, money-hungry, unscrupulous human beings behind this?
And
Well,
he's
there are,
showing that the human
yeah.
brain is structured in such a way that the people that have an excess of this reptilian stem activated as opposed to the neocortex. The neocortex is basically the ability to think outside the box, to think outside the tribe. It's the new brain. It's the
Yeah,
part
you're
of
right.
that connects us
There-
with the universe.
There is a reptilian aspect to our brains, I'll grant you that. But there again, we're talking about human beings who may have reptile-like qualities.
That's true.
well, there is an R complex. It's, when you look at a reptile, our reptiles on this
Yeah.
planet, there
And
is
they've
a
got
part
that
of their
kind- like
brain
you
that's very
noted,
similar
they've
to
got
our
that
brain,
kind
but
of-
our brain is sort of
They're
layered on
cold-blooded
top of
killers.
that.
We got to let
older
you
brain.
go, Rick, because
Thanks.
we got a lot of stuff
Good
here
show.
left.
Good show, even though I may disagree with
All right.
most of it. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
nice to hear from
if
you,
we
Rick.
could get that number 19 up there, John, the hive mind, this might give a graphic image of what we're trying to project through. No, you can disagree with David Icke. You can say, like Rick has said, that there are perfectly normal explanations for all of this. But what he's saying is there's alternative explanations also. There's alternative explanations that have been hidden from us through these secret societies and cabals and religious orders.
Yeah,
and
I don't
things
have that much.
that keep a
trouble with
lot of
that.
the information away from us. Now, Rick says we don't have much evidence of this, but look at
Well-
Frontline. Frontline last week did a expose on the Vatican, and they found out that a number, I don't know if it's the majority or what, of the cardinals have a homosexual cabal. And
Well-
that's why they're protecting all these pedophilic priests.
What I heard when we were talking with our director also, and he saw this, and I didn't, and you saw it. And
I
didn't,
saw
but,
it.
But he said that the story was that these were people who were in the central administration. These were cardinals who were closest to the former popes. These were like people in the Curia and stuff.
He's saying, David Icke is saying that the majority of the reptile brain hybrid people have a mind like this. They're being constantly bombarded from, I mean, where do we get thoughts and ideas anyway? It comes in through some sort of mental process.
We get mean
And that the brain
thoughts.
is interpreting this and creating a lot of fear and anger and frustration in people. Now, we got to get this last part in.
They're like
That's
drugs.
he calls that the hive mind. And number 20, if we can show number 20, he says that what he uses as a symbol is a lion, that these truth vibrations have to be, the only way we can break the grip of the reptiles is by increasing our consciousness or understanding completely the limitations of the intellect strengthened with opinionated knowledge. That the only barrier stopping us from understanding a greater understanding is our own minds
Sure.
that are being conditioned by what we think is possible. And he's saying the truth vibrations are coming in a way that there are individuals in our world right now. See how this, he calls them, he uses the lion because he's saying, get up, get off your ass and realize that the snake has got humanity by the nuts and that we can breathe new life into the human consciousness by seeing past the limitations of the intellect strengthened with opinionated
getting to your
knowledge.
title and to
I know
gnosis,
that looks kind of religious, but you know,
knowing is knowing that you don't know. If you
Just
if
say
you know
no.
that you know, then you probably aren't close to having that gnosis and knowing that you're living through a false world.
And let's get number 21 up there if we can, John, the Norwegian lights. Now, he's saying that these people are going to use in the near future, this is a prophecy that he has, that they're going to use holographic projectors that they're set up already in space to project images in the sky, especially amongst different nations that believe in this kind of stuff, like the image, the Christians.
Oh yeah.
See?
I've seen that in video.
This
before.
is a program that the DARPA does, where they can project holographic images into the sky. This thing is a swirling spiral, and the picture was taken over
Denmark?
Norway,
Norway. I saw it
right
on,
above a harp base,
I saw it on the news.
right above
actually.
a base that would use this kind of projection technique, the Norwegian spiral
So
light.
he thinks it's
They're getting ready to try to
an artificially projected thing.
basically phase in extraterrestrials into our reality. That's why they're
Well,
bringing
what
out
this
all
thing
these shows.
was it looked to people like a black hole. You know, the way we imagine black holes on Star Trek or something had opened up, or, you know, a Babylon 5 black hole. And they appeared in several places around the world.
Now, I want to just say, we got 1 minute left, that I have to admit, like, I want to say to Rick that I don't know how much of this stuff is real. I can't verify any of it, just like I can't verify that there's microorganisms all over my body, but I got a feeling there is. And you know, it wasn't that long ago, 500 years ago, nobody would accept that. And now everybody accepts it, right? So we're constantly changing reality through our ability to see deeper and deeper into the matrix of how our, especially psychological aspects of our brain are put together. And I think the hologram's a big part of it.
I'll say this about Ike. There's a lot of information that I think is quite verifiable that he puts together. And many of the streams that he's relating to one another do work, but it's his overall picture that he puts together that I question, and his focus on reptiles.
Well, we'll see you later, folks. Good luck, and I hope we haven't scared you too badly. I hope you can sleep tonight. Just take a look into it. Just, that's all he's saying, is come open with your mind and don't just rely on the brain.
Yeah, and Ike has other books. He probably has about 5 other books, and they're each about 700 to 1,400 pages long.
And
So
check out
there's
that
plenty
Thrive.
to check out.
Check out that thrivemovement.com.
Yeah, Ike appears in Thrive, but they take out all of his alien stuff, and they only keep his talking about the Bilderbergers and Wall Street and the Wall Street game of acquiring all the real property in the world through the money game.
You know, a lot of these people are into the 1%.
Oh, we're talking about beyond the